On June 21st, 2021, I spoke with Christine White. Based in Montreal, Canada, Christine White is an Intermedia Visual Arts major, minoring in sociology at Concordia University. Her artwork is interceptive and highly interactive within public spaces. The line between sociological research and visual arts blurs for Christine, resulting in new ways of seeing data and interpersonal interaction.
My name is Christine White, and yes, I'm from Victoria, and I'm here in Montreal finishing my Bachelor of Fine Arts with in Intermedia with a minor in sociology. And so that's a huge part of my identity is being a student right now. But I guess my focus in my art practice is, I guess just exploring the social world through art and using different methods to collaborate with people and have experiences and also kind of learn from each other.
Beautiful. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Now, I'm privileged to be familiar with, maybe not all of it, but I like to think that I'm fairly familiar with a great body of your work. And so there's certain things I associate with your work, and there's questions related to that I'm going to bring up. But since you mentioned the sociology, which I think is a fantastic pairing personally, based on what I know about you, how is the sociology interacting with your work that you do, and perhaps like currently and in the past?
Yeah, well, I think that I've always had a real people-centered approach to my work. I've always been really concerned with social norms and just the different ways we interact or identify as in our societal structure. Always been really curious as to like what it is that affects those things. Um, which I think like when I was younger, I thought, oh, maybe there's some psychology there. But then once I started to learn more about sociology, I realized like, okay, this is what I need to get into to sort of get a good foundation in social theory, as well as explore their research methods, because I realized I kind of actually started doing it without knowing what it was. I'm not sure if I was really doing it much in Victoria other than perhaps making work that was interactive in some way. But I started to do a bit of research at the school where I guess I was doing field work and didn't know that that's what I was doing. So once I started to learn more about the sort of different academic structures and someone was like, hey, I think you should look into sociology. I looked it up and there we go. Now I'm mostly just learning the research methods, and I find that it pairs really nicely with my art practice because I can then also think about ways to collect data and then represent that in an artful way that's perhaps like pushing certain social norms around research or like how we gain knowledge from each other, and to try to maybe include more of the senses or things like that. Yeah. So I guess I definitely am more into the qualitative stuff than the quantitative stuff, but maybe there's interesting ways to kind of also take those numbers and turn them into something more tangible.
Solid. That's really cool. I love it. I'm so glad to hear that. Personally, I really, upon learning that, I thought that totally makes sense. That's like such a perfect fit. That totally suits Christine's work. Like I'm so glad. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
first and foremost, I associate you with performance art. That's like the first thing that comes to mind when I think of you. However, I know you're exploring other trajectories over at Concordia with your bachelor's. What are some of these trajectories, and perhaps how do they even relate to performance art?
Yeah, it's so funny when I heard you say that you link my work to, or you think of me linked with performance art. I was like, oh, I don't know if I've never really like thought of myself as just specifically a performance artist. So it's interesting to think about the memories of our encounters, and I guess the sort of scenes that we would cross paths in was a lot of that, a lot of the performances that I would do. And I think that what what got me into performing um, is that there is a lot of that social element, because oftentimes you have opportunity to be immersed like with the viewers or the crowd in some way. Um, and yeah, I like that ability to be able to connect with people through my work. So having an audience, I think, really suits that. And performance art is also an opportunity to play with social norms and get away from perhaps our like everyday
Mm.
autopilot mode.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's kind of this exploration in a way, or it can be really playful. And so I haven't really been doing a lot of performances since I moved to Montreal, but I'm still working with those concepts, like looking at social norms and trying to figure out ways to connect with people through my work, and you know really trying to be really explorative and curious. So I'd say by adding that minor in sociology, to start to kind of move into this creative research practice, um, if we want to get into the nitty gritty, there could be a performative element there for sure. And I think that intervention is something I've been exploring more at Concordia, which is often, I learned about intervention when I was working in performance. And so that idea of like going out into public space, or um, having some kind of art object that's intervening on public space is the kind of things I've been really interested in doing lately.
Cool. Okay.
The intervention. I love that.
Yeah, intervention.
What are some examples of intervention that you've been up to?
Okay, so this is one of the first pieces that I did in my first semester that I think really sort of connects this trajectory of adding the minor. I created this, it was a bin basically, that on it said, note to self, Niddah.Nadda Moi Même. And it's like, oh no, it's kind of hidden. It's just over there. Anyways, it's the same dimensions as the garbage and recycle bins at Concordia. And I've made it out of plywood. Little side note of some of my earthy interests, I played around with a little natural dye stain on it and some
Cool.
beeswax finishing. I used some recycled or reclaimed plexiglass for the front and the top so you can see into the vessel. And I put a hole in the top and took some paper squares, had them on a bulldog clip at the top of this bin with a pen. And I just brought it to different places on campus and left it overnight and would go check on it the next day. And it was a bit of a slow start, and to get to collect notes from people, because basically, just to bring it back to my initial statement of note to self, this bin was designed to try to invite people to write a note to themselves, but by leaving it in the bin, they're kind of inherently not actually leaving a note to themselves. But I was interested to see like what kind of interactions I might get. It's pretty clear like that I could count the amount of notes that I was getting in a space, and when I actually would go and like write the date and the location on the back, and then I would move it to a new spot. And it really got me thinking about spaces as well, the kinds of things that we might ignore or the kinds of things we might take time to enjoy, especially if it's like disrupting our everyday routines. I thought it got me really thinking about, when designing interactive things that are intervening on public spaces, what other things are going on in that space that might encourage someone to want to stop and take a moment to write a note to themselves. So the most successful place, which I think might have been two different things, was the fact that it was the last place. There was already lots of notes in it. And it was in the library where it's really quiet. You'd go up the stairs and you'd turn, and the printing station's just over there, where is a place where people are often waiting. And it's just basically, if you turned, it's like you could clearly see it. There was not a lot of other things going on visually. So I got a lot of notes from there, and it was really interesting reading through the different things people wrote. And I turned this into this installation where I made a sort of data visualization by hanging the notes on strings to represent each day and each different location. And I put them on speakers that I programmed to have like super, super low frequencies that like vibrated the notes. I also had some lights above these strings, and had some proximity sensors. So when someone would actually go to walk in front of it, that would actually trigger the light to flicker, and the deep sound, or you actually can't really hear it, but the vibration, or a human wouldn't be able to hear it. And for me, that felt like a kind of, I wanted to sort of put energy into the notes, but then it also kind of makes it hard to read them. So I don't know. I think there's sometimes I'm not really sure why I do what I do, but maybe there's a weird playfulness of like, you can't really write a note to yourself. Or I was kind of interested in this like sort of collective consciousness of note to self, this like collective self. So that was a really fun thing that I didn't even realize. I knew it was data, but I didn't realize I was, by recording things, or yeah. So that's one example. I could give you more, or we could speak about other things.
I just want to say I think it's really endearing to hear you look back and be critical of your prior work. In retrospect, it's like, well, I could have done such and such, and oh, I don't know why I did this. I think it sounds really cool. I wish I could have been there in person to experience that. I think that's a really neat concept and a recreation of data from a really interesting experiment.
Yeah, it was an experiment.
Yeah, it is. I would say that was an experiment. And I would even say that, observations you made about locations where you did garner more notes could, incorporate different theories. Like one
Yeah.
idea that came to my mind was people are beside printers. Not only are they waiting in line, but they're also at the end of writing something. So they're feeling a little bit, oh, sure, I'll go take a stab at writing something in the quirky box, right?
Oh, isn't that funny? I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, but there's so many fun things you can look at, and that's because you've collected a whole bunch of really neat data, essentially, and observations. Okay,
Yeah.
Another project I'd love to hear about is Slump Test, because I know that Slump Test had a big role to play. I do believe, was it this year or was it 2020? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Well, it was a year-long course, so it would have been over 2020 and 2021.
Gorgeous.
The fall and the winter semester. So this past school year, basically.
Mm.
Yeah.
COVID, the remainder.
Yeah, online school. I'm going to just pause for 1 second because I realized I didn't. Perfect.
Slump Test.
Yes. So the slump test is a definite, has definitely been inspired by the research methods I've been learning in sociology. And it's also a response to having to figure out how to do my social practice online. Like when I'm so interested in doing interactions with people and exploring connections, I really had to figure out like, what do I do now that we're all isolated from each other? So I would say something that informed it definitely was a very spontaneous thing that one day I kept seeing the same orange cone sitting out front of my workspace, and it was like this forgotten cone. And like one day I even saw someone kind of like pick it up and move it onto the curb like it was on the road. There was no other cones around, no other signage. It was there for about a week, and I was like, I want you, cone. I'm taking you inside. Cones are useful for doing intervention work because it can make you look more serious, I guess, or legit. It makes you look governmental. That's not a word, but anyways, I grabbed it, and at the time, I was with a partner at the time, Nick Cabelli, and I would often talk about my thoughts and ideas with him, projects. That was kind of what brought us together. We were talking a lot about art together, and I was talking about how I wanted to do some kind of exploration of connecting with my classmates in some way. And he mentioned that there's this thing called the slump test that is something they do in the construction industry where they put concrete into a cone and then they flip it over and lift it up, and then the consistency, there's like there's 4 different themes that kind of emerge from that consistency of concrete based on the shape that it keeps. And then that informs them, either do they need more or less water or whatever to get the desired effect. Because I mean, not to get too much into concrete, but that I thought was like a really beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
So I to apply to this kind of exploration, and I wanted to research the effects of learning online on the fine arts students at Concordia. So by thinking about the slump test and this concrete, I thought this was a visual metaphor for to represent us art students as we started to spread out into our homes. I wanted to know how much space people were taking up, how much stuff did they have. I also, this pairs well with my curiosity to want to know what was like behind the screen that like we weren't seeing, like what's over there. I want to know what's in front of you, you know, like I'm only seeing like out, like I want to know what's in. And so the slum test for me was a way to kind of connect with my peers, explore those curiosities, and have this kind of nice visual metaphor to sort of help lead the research process. So I ended up making, there's sort of like 3 different methods that I use, 2 which are like very standard sociological research methods. I made a survey. I can't say that it's particularly scientific, but I did make a survey. And I also did interviews, which I actually haven't even yet processed. Like they helped inform it because I had these great connections, but I'd like to actually still do something with that data. So I'll side note that. It will be an audio piece, actually. That's my intentions. Anyways, so there was the survey, and then something that actually came up while I was speaking with my mom, who I get a lot of inspiration from. You know, she's an educator and a naturalist, and I was speaking to her about wanting to do a kind of what I was calling desk self-portraits, where I would start to be able to ask people to reveal like what was behind their camera.
Cool.
And I thought it would be interesting to have them like record the objects on their desk. And then she suggested that maybe I could ask people to write it down as a word. And that way it's more accessible for people who might not have drawing skills. And I was like, ding, ding, yes, because then I can do thematic analysis, which is one of the research methods I learned that I love, which you can just apply to any kind of text, basically, where you're applying you look for different common threads when you're assessing the words.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's a way to process like qualitative data. And so the desk self-portraits ended up being something that I tried out with my classmates during a crit, I guess, or like a evaluation midterm sort of thing. And it worked really well. I was surprised. And, you know, we were a small class, so I didn't get a lot of data, but I definitely got enough to start playing around and thinking about things. And I also am really glad I did this, but I also asked them to just take a photograph of their desk. So that then when I was looking through the written ones, I was able to sort of see like, what did they write down? What did they not write down? And then I also had a whole spreadsheet where I entered all the words that people wrote down. And then I was able to count and calculate. I put them into different themes. And yeah, anyways, that was just a sort of a way to get a sense of like people's desks. And then it kind of made sense to then start like overlapping and merging these photos. So I'll share with you the link to the slump test because
Cool.
these photos are on there. Also, the website, which I've never made a website before, started to make a lot of sense to have the slump test be a website as a way to then gain more participants. It was a place people could go to. You know, we didn't have to meet up in person. And so it both ended up being a place of collection, but also a place of display. And it lined up well for our year-end exhibition, IMCA Fest, where it was mostly entirely online. So I had to kind of change how I normally like to work, doing three-dimensional things in public space, intervening on the streets, this or that, and instead kind of like intervened in cyberspace, I guess,
Yeah.
and had more like flat works that came out of that.
That is really cool. I love hearing how everybody has adapted their work to this world that we have had to be in. I know there's the transition that we're making to, normal again, but I think it's really cool, and there should be a lot of recognition for the adaptations that people have done with their work that has been very specific to them and very specific to engaging with people. So it's been unique to them and engaging with them. And that is really neat. I'm really looking forward to checking out the Slump Test website, and I encourage anyone and everyone who's listening to immediately go and look at it and to contribute. And I don't know, my personal opinion, of course, is just one jerk's opinion here, but I do feel moving forward, there's still probably going to be a great deal of engagement that is remote and a great deal of engagement that is online. And people will just really be choosing carefully what they want to engage with in person. And I think that, perhaps there will be a rebirth of the arts and people will say, okay, I really want to go and see such and such in person because that's meaningful to me. But there will still be levels of engagement online. So I say, it is great that you have a website for it as a meeting point and a creation point for it. So I'm excited. This is so cool. And when you
Thanks.
when you mentioned the audio, I thought I thought about your audio piece that is a part of Hexennacht this year, Post Strategy and Eraser. But I also thought of Pedal Box and how Pedal Box existed a great deal in Victoria.
Yes.
But has a different form at Concordia. And I understand. And there's a sound art component. So
okay, we'll try to tie those together.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pedal Box Gallery is this mobile exhibition space on a bike trailer, and it is not my original concept. I believe it's Kluani and John who started it in Victoria in like 2013, even 2014. Anyhow, they were mostly featuring youth artists. They were able to get so basically they got a bike trailer from Tony's Trailers, RIP Tony. Yeah, I heard that this year that he passed away. I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, he was so, I think there was an article about him in the paper and everything. He was very well known on the island. That was his thing, making bike trailers. So anyways, so their original intention was they wanted something that could be powered by bike that could act as like a float in a parade or something. I think that's where the idea started. And then the way they were able to access some funding was by working with youth. And so it grew in, once the trailer, the physical infrastructure was obtained from Tony, they then were inviting different artists to display artwork on this moving platform. So they had invited me to exhibit something in 2014, and I just loved the idea because it's performative, it's intervention, it's public space. It just hit all the marks for me, and I was so excited about it that I was like, I want to take it out. Like, let's put this thing on my bike. Let's go. And I would say to this day that Tea Party on a Bike Trailer and its second version, its later version, Mobile Empress, is like one of my favorite pieces that I've created. And after that piece, John invited me to help coordinate Pedalbox Gallery, and I was so honored and thrilled to be a part of it. And honestly, out of all the work that I've done in my art career, in non-artistic work, Pedalbox Gallery has been one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do. It just hits a lot of those boxes. Like I said, it's intervening on public space. It's disrupting people's like autopilot mode. It's also bikes. I love bikes, by the way. I hadn't mentioned that yet. And that's sort of another sort of funny thread that weaves itself through my art practice is I got really into bikes because I like that they're sustainable. You know, I think there's, especially on the West Coast, there's a lot of, you know, growing up in that culture, I think there's people really have an appreciation for nature. And I just always knew how bad of a pollution gas was, as well as the whole extraction process. And just shout out to all the people doing really hard work in BC right now, fighting against the pipelines. So I think for me, cycling really was aligned with my values of like wanting to care for the planet, and also get a little exercise going from A to B. So by also then now combining some kind of artistic practice with a bicycle, it really just started to make sense. And pedal box sort of, I guess the year that I was moving away from Montreal in 2018, John was also moving out of, did I say moving out of Victoria to Montreal? John was also moving from Victoria, and he gave me his blessing to continue the name in Montreal and get it going here. And we decided that he should hold on to the trailer because he was going to go live in this off-grid community in the middle of BC to like raise his son. And so I like, from the moment I moved here, I was looking for partners. I was like, I got to find the right people. You know, that's how it worked in Victoria, is that we were able to apply for funding through the Ministry of Casual Living.
Yeah.
So that's what Pedalbox was associated with. It's never been its own not-for-profit, but it's always had a close link with a not-for-profit as a kind of extension of like what that organization is doing. So if you haven't heard of the Ministry of Casual Living, they're this amazing not-for-profit art organization. The last I heard, and I think they still are, providing affordable studio spaces for artists and also exhibiting different exhibitions in that space, as well as a window, I think, in the, I forget what alley that is.
It's Dragon Alley. It's weird.
It's called Dragon Alley?
Dragon Alley. I know.
Cool.
It's right beside the Odeon. And the other thing they were doing, which I got excited about, and I do believe it was the summer before COVID when they started doing it, they started doing these really cool art movie screenings in the garage.
Wow.
Which
cool. Like, I remember the garage. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Super cool space.
Yeah.
And people and thing.
Totally. And so I knew I would never be able to find the Ministry of Casual Living again in a way, but I was hoping to find something like it, or like some kind of organization that would take interest in my idea and be open to me kind of applying for funding like through their name. And I just started talking to people, and it took about 2 years until I met Sarah Brown, who works in the Dean's office at Concordia and runs the Office of Rules of Norms. And right? Another funny kind of like government name. The Ministry of Casual Living, the Office of Rules and Norms. It's good. So just I guess I don't want to get into it too much, but I met Sarah Brown because I got hired to do research for the 10-year space planning committee for the fine arts. And that was also that was right before I added the minor in sociology. And they were literally asking us to do field work. They're like, go out on campus, explore the spaces, collect data, and then make an art piece. And I was like, yes. I could share with you my little most recent link to an online portfolio that does have some of the work that I did in that rover space planning thing. So I won't talk too much about that piece right now, but that's how I met Sarah Brown. And cool. One thing kind of led to another. She invited me out for lunch one day, and I was telling her about my project, and I was like, I just really need to find partners, and you know, who do you recommend? Like, where should I go? Actually, side note, I had already tried to partner with Dardar, which I thought would be a really great partner because they actually don't have a space. They like have a little a shipping container that's an office where they do all their programming, and they they have performance artists who do performances like in public space. So I thought, oh, it'd be such a cool partnership, but no, they weren't into it. They were focusing on other things. I got shut down, but you got, that's just a part of it. You hear no, and I just needed to find yes. So Sarah Brown put me in touch with, I'm not sure I'm going to say his last name properly, Alex Meglis, who's the community engagement coordinator, or maybe that's not exactly his title. It's the Office of Community Engagement. And yes, he has a role there. And he was in the midst of this pilot project collaboration thing with this building called Bâtiment 7, which is a whole other story that I could get into about how amazing and like radical this building is. Perhaps I can throw you a link that could like describe a bit more about what they're doing.
Yeah, please.
But basically, one of the not-for-profit organizations of many that are operating in this building is the Point St. Charles Art School. So Alex met me at Bâtiment 7, gave me a lovely tour of the building, explained the history of Point St. Charles and sort of what led to this kind of mind-boggling like utopia that is there. And I actually do just need to say that this building is cooperatively owned. So there's like no landlord, but I think that's all I'm going to say. You'll have to look into it more, but it's a really fantastic story what's going on there. So the Point St. Charles Art School, I approached and explained my concept to them, and they loved it. They were totally into it. Like one of their things one of their problems is that they have a limited amount of space, and so they don't always have places to exhibit the work that their students are creating. So I thought Pedalbox could be a great solution for that. They also were wanting to engage with the community more, and so by having something on wheels that's going out into public space that's then representing the art school is a way for me to engage with community and get that dialogue going.
Cool.
So that was like almost going to happen right before the pandemic. And Alex had actually, I can't believe this. So he must have also really loved the idea and just has been spreading the word, speaking good things about it. Because all of a sudden one day I got this email from him being like, hey, we have some extra money lying around for the Sustainable Action Fund at Concordia. Would you like it? I'm like, yes, yes, please. So that's where all that got put on hold. And then side note, last summer was not great for me. I lost all my work. Pedalbox was on hold. I didn't have much going on, and I don't do well with that. So actually, once school started online, I started to feel so much better, and I started to think about and be a little worried about what this summer was going to be like. And just started to realize like, well, wait a second, maybe Pedalbox Gallery can actually be a pandemic response. Like maybe its mobility can be a risk management tool in order to have like, small scale like social interactions that are safe, that can then move and reach more people instead of being this like specific place where, so it's not really like hosting, right? Like the rules have been getting better nowadays, but at the time you weren't able to like gather, people in public, so how do you engage with people and art? I thought this would be a really great way to do that.
And when are the soundscapes or the sound art that's associated with, is that sort of like a response to the pandemic? And
that too. Yeah. So once I started to revisit the idea, and I actually ended up building the bike trailer. Thankfully at Bâtiment 7, there's a metal shop there, and I met it's like a I don't know if this is really the slogan, but I believe they're kind of like a feminist metal shop. So it's like run by women, and it's also focused on artworks. So
What?
yes, yes. So they create a real safe space for women to get to learn and try out metalwork and do these different like metal foundry techniques. So shout out to La Coulée. They've been super helpful in the project. And actually, Jessie is the one I was put in touch with as during my mission of trying to like find partners and this or that. And when it came down to realizing like I actually need a bike trailer, like what am I gonna do? Like I needs to be big, So I never thought I would actually build one because Tony, this professional, made it. So, anyways, Jesse really helped out in the design of build of the bike trailer. And once I actually had it, I was actually doing that while I was in the semester, doing slump tests with my peers, and we were organizing IMCA Fest for our year-end show. We decided to have a few different things happening over a span of 5 days, one of which I was really trying to promote having something in person. I thought pedal box could also be a solution for my classmates and I to actually have something happen in real life. No, or not. You know what I mean? In person. We actually did start doing that IRL and URL.
IRL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to get in the debate about cyberspace being real or not. But anyways,
Another conversation.
yeah. So actually, originally I wanted to do projections because so many, like about half of my classmates were doing video work in Intermedia, of course. And then the curfew happened. And so it started to look pretty impossible to do projections at night when we were asked to be home at like 8 o'clock. And it's not even starting to be dark yet around that time in April that we wanted to do this. So then the other option that came from that was to do some soundscapes on the bike trailer and feature the works of my classmates. And then I was able to borrow equipment from the school to have 2 speakers and a little amplifier. I actually used my old battery system that I shipped here that we were using on Pedalbox Gallery. And yeah, I set that all up and went around to different places, just like blasting some sound art, and had some people meet up and join me. And yeah, it was really fun. It was nice to just have something be outside.
Yeah, I think that is and just in comparison from BC to Quebec, we have had it easy. Let's be honest. BC's had it very easy across Canada. Quebec and Ontario, you guys have had heavy duty stuff going on. Obviously, the cases are much higher, but it's been heavy duty. Your province has demanded more, and it's been intense, where we could still get out and run the streets perhaps at a distance, where that's like a privilege that was not afforded to so many people for quite a number of months even. So
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started. Like
Yeah.
on the whole curfew thing, I just thought it was so absurd. You were allowed to like walk your dog or go to and from seeing a sick parent, but it's like, what if I have a sick friend?
Right.
What if I just want to go for a bike ride at night because I can't sleep or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just felt very like matriarchal or like
Controlling.
family, like nuclear family rule,
Yeah,
and like
it's weird.
your kin only being like your family.
Yeah.
So anyways, I will say though that I'm sure it's been really difficult for all the people behind the scenes having to make those decisions.
Yeah.
With really, they were just trying to do their best to keep us all safe. And at the end of the day, I'm happy to respect what rules were being enforced to try to keep people safe. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
sure. Okay, did post-strategic eraser
Oh yes.
fit onto the bike trailer, or is that a separate sound
So
art piece?
post strategic content eraser itself is an art piece I collaborated with Nick, Francesca, and Doyle that we actually got to exhibit at Clark in the middle of the pandemic, they had all of a sudden this random little window that opened that they were allowed to have people inside their gallery, and we just somehow got to have our piece there. And so that's where that name comes from, was actually that collaborative process with the four of us. And the piece that I sent to you is the track that I created for our collaborative work.
Wow.
And I was doing, I was working on the technical side of this little sound box, basically, that was, it was like a little box that had a switch that said erase, and on the bottom it said efface. So basically, like, whatever side you're flicking, you're erasing, apparently. Basically, I did all the circuitry and programming behind this little box that just had two headphone outputs.
Nice.
And it had each one of our tracks on the SD card inside the hardware.
Cool.
So the coding and the input from the button was basically creating different layers of our individual tracks to be played. And so, and like on this like never ending loop, I think Doyle's like super into math, and he calculated like how many hours that it's possible to not actually hear the same mashup. And it's like something like over 300 hours or something.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So like whatever moment you're like experiencing it, then you're probably never really going to get the same experience with it. Just depending on where it is in the loop and like how much someone's pressed the button.
That is cool.
Anyways, so basically I titled it that and I realized I'm like, I was always putting 2, but I'm almost thinking maybe it needs to be called Movement 2. Anyways, that is where that piece came from. And yeah.
Cool.
Does that answer your
That
was
totally
it on Pedalbox?
Yeah. It was
So
on the box.
what's funny, and I get this a lot actually, I want to be really careful about the power dynamic that I have by being responsible for Pedalbox Gallery and being the person behind running it, that I'm less motivated to show my own work on it, because I feel like that's not really fair, I guess. I did add it to the list. And so what I did was I did play it when I was going to and from where I was starting the exhibition, I guess, just to have some ambient sound. And yeah, so once I actually met up with some of the other artists, I wanted to make sure to feature all of those artists from my class. But yes, there were a few moments on the side where I played it.
You're so modest. You're so modest and dear, and so accommodating and caring.
Oh, thank you.
Christine, it's been really wonderful just being able to see you, being able to hear your lovely voice, and to hear what you've been up to. This has been like absolutely fantastic. I know we could actually talk about so many other really cool things, and I think over the next like year we should definitely do this again. It's like our fingertips.
Absolutely.
This is so easy, but like,
True.
Oh my God, this has been great.
I really appreciate this, especially because it's so easy for me to go in great detail about things. I know it's easy to get side tangents and everything. So I'm glad that you are keeping us on track and wrapping this up. And I agree. I think that maybe we should do this again, and we can chat about some more things going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Christine, for chatting with me. Don't miss her soundscape piece, Post-Strategic Content Eraser, during the Hexennacht livestream, June 26th through 27th. Head to cabaretvoltairediversions.org to get details on all participating artists, as well as bookmark the livestream page.